The truck carried for a few more miles, turning a right turn, then a left. Clementine remained still as she could, but the longer she sat there the harder it became. Clementine sighed as the truck pulled to another stop. Lowering the blanket from her face, she spoke, "Are we there yet?" Kenny jumped, briefly swerving the car, but quickly regaining control. "What the hell?" Carly looked back to the teen in surprise. "How did you get in here, Clem?" "Door was unlocked." Clementine shrugged. "Anyway, are we there yet?" "Who said you were coming?" Kenny demanded, voice filled with annoyance. Clementine cocked a brow. "You're not really going to drive all the way back, are you?" Kenny didn't bother answering her question. "Get out the car. We're here." He pulled a backpack onto his back and got out, practically slamming the door. Carly rolled her eyes, and got out as well, followed by Clementine, who was wearing a grin on her face. Once they were all out, Kenny turned to the girl. "Want to explain to me how you got in the truck?" Clementine paused. "I walked." Kenny let out a groan while Carly stifled a giggle. "How didn't I notice you back there?" "Invisibility cloak," Clementine joked with a smirk. "Knock it off." Kenny grumbled. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" Clementine replied, "I'm here to help." "Well, we don't need your help, kid," Kenny said. "Go back to the inn." Clementine pouted. "Don't give me that look." Kenny shook his head, not letting her puppy dog eyes convince him. "Go." Clementine put on a cheeky smile. Turning, she started walking toward the street. 3, 2, 1. "Clementine, get back here," Kenny called, sounded greatly annoyed. Clementine made her way back over. Kenny shot her a look. "Get in the truck." "Are you kidding me?" Clementine asked. "Definitely not," Kenny replied, motioning for her to get in the truck. Clementine sighed, and started opening the door. A smile crossed her lips once she was about to get in. Carly quickly noticed her smile. "Come on, Clem." "What?" Kenny demanded. "She's just going to follow us when our backs are turned," Carly said. "We might as well take her with us." Kenny let out a heavy sigh as Clementine gave him a mischievous smile. "Let's just get this over with," he said. "Stay close." Clementine nodded. The three of them walked silently, keeping an eye out for walkers. "Looks like we're good," Carly said. Kenny nodded. "Yeah. Seems that way." They continued to walk until they came to a large van that had a ladder on the side. "Now what?" Clementine asked. "We climb," Kenny said. "All right." Clementine smiled. Before Kenny could say another word, the girl was already climbing up the ladder. Kenny sighed, and followed behind the teen. Carly glanced around, making sure there were no walkers in sight, before following as well. "Come on, let's hustle." Kenny carefully made his way off the van and onto the ground before helping Clementine and Carly down. The trio made their way into the drugstore, Kenny making sure Clementine didn't wander off. "All right, let's be quick," Kenny said, "in and out. Grab what you can." Both Carly and Clementine nodded. "Not you," Kenny said to Clementine. "I can help, Kenny," the teen said. She sent him her best puppy dog eyes. "Fine," Kenny agreed. "You stay close to me." Clementine nodded and started gathering supplies. They were making out good, when suddenly a gunshot rang through the air. Kenny froze for a second. What the hell was that? Carly glanced around. "Came from outside," she said. "No shit," Kenny grumbled. "Whatever it was, it's probably going to bring those things this way," Carly said. "We need to hurry." Kenny sighed. "Well, let's hurry up, and get the fuck out of here." They knew if the way to their truck got blocked off, they'd be trapped. They couldn't let that happen. Gathering supplies was turning out to be a dangerous task. The store had been stripped of bottled water and canned goods. It would be a surprise if they were able to find any. They managed to grab countless amounts of energy bars and other snack-type foods. They picked up a few band-aids and other medical supplies. Carly ran to check out the window. "Shit." "What?" Kenny called to her. "Walkers," Carly replied. "How many?" Kenny asked. "Just a few. We should be able to handle them," she said. "But that means more are probably on their way." "Think we got enough?" Clementine asked. "I think we're going to have to call it here," Kenny said, zipping up the backpack before slinging it over his shoulder. "Let's go." Kenny led the group outside, but they froze at the sight that met them. There were several zombies, clearly attracted by the gunfire. Once they got outside, they were quickly noticed by the group of walkers. "I thought it was only a few of them," Kenny grumbled. "There were only a few," Carly replied, pulling out her gun. She started shooting the approaching creatures. Clementine let out a squeak as one started approaching her, but Carly shot it before it could touch her. "Get to the truck, Clem," Kenny ordered. Clementine quickly broke into a jog towards the truck, while Kenny and Carly focused on the walkers. As the girl approached the truck, she noticed more walkers approaching, putting a wall between her, Kenny, and Carly. More walkers than anticipated were showing up, and eventually, Clementine had gotten separated from Kenny and Carly, both physically and visually. She became nervous, but as she noticed the truck was blocked off by walkers as well, so there was no hiding in there. As she was frozen in fear, the walkers soon took notice of her and started to advance towards the girl. Clementine's heart was pounding, she didn't know what to do. She was trapped. The walkers continued to approach her and Clementine immediately panicked. She glanced around for an exit. Eyes full of fear, the girl dashed off. Clementine dodged one zombie, its hand brushing against her arm, but not close enough to grab her. She continued to run, the walkers followed behind her, but she didn't slow her pace. She wouldn't until she was sure she was safe. Carly continued shooting any zombies left standing. "More are coming," Kenny said, pointed towards the incoming walkers. Carly sighed, "We need to clear a path to the truck." Kenny nodded, clenching his teeth as he watched the still approaching zombies. He looked around and noticed an opening. "Come on, run." Carly quickly followed after him, still shooting away walkers that were blocking their path. The walkers tried to keep up, but they weren't fast enough, and eventually the two managed to make it to the truck. They took a moment to catch their breath. The walkers were still a good distance away, but they knew that wouldn't last long. They needed to leave, now. Clementine pulled out her father's gun and looked into the chamber. It was full. She mentally thanked Carly for giving her bullets the other day. She ran a good while, shooting her gun at any walkers that got too close. Her feet had started to get tired from running so much. She didn't know how much time had passed before she finally slowed down. She had managed to lose the walkers. She glanced around, realizing she had no idea where she was. She not only managed to lose the walkers, but Kenny and Carly as well. Now she was faced with the task of returning to the group. She had to find a way back to the truck. Hopefully they didn't leave without her. Her heart pounded with the thought of being left behind. She was starting to regret sneaking in the truck. She hadn't expected this to happen. She was terrified. She didn't know what to do. She tried to think positive thoughts, but the possibility of dying out there alone scared her, and the thought of being stranded out there scared her even more. She had to make a way back. She knew at this point she only had herself to rely on and no one else. Maybe Kenny and Carly would come looking for her, but until then, she was on her own. Kenny took a moment to catch his breath. "Let's get the fuck out of here." Carly nodded before looking around. "Where's Clem?" she asked. "Shit. She must have run off," Kenny said, glancing into the truck to see it was empty. "Why would she do that for?" Carly sighed. "She probably didn't have any other options. She must have got cornered by walkers." Kenny grumbled. "We gotta find her." "We can't. We have no idea which direction she took off in," Carly said. "We need to lose these walkers before we do anything." She glanced over her shoulder to see the walkers still shuffling forward. Kenny sighed, but agreed. "All right. We can try to circle around to find her once they get off our asses," Carly said. "Got it," Kenny replied. The two got into the car and Kenny immediately pulled off. Clementine chewed her lip as she strode forward. She was silently kicking herself as she tried to figure out a plan. She needed to stay quiet. She didn't want to attract any notice. If she wasn't careful, she could end up becoming dinner for a couple walkers. She stayed on her guard, looking right to left nervously. She was on her guard to obvious dangers as well as unknown ones. The girl wondered if she should turn back, but that would have been a death sentence. There was no way all those walkers would have cleared out that fast. Her best bet was to lay low for a while. With a small sigh, Clementine continued to walk forward. After only an hour of walking, her body was already starting to ache and her mind was full of panic with the thought of being lost, no, being trapped in those woods forever. She tried to remain calm, but it was harder with each passing minute she was out there, with each startling noise that was heard. As her young body started to become leaden, she forced herself to take a break. She leaned against a tree, watching her surrounding cautiously. Kenny pulled the truck to a stop, letting out a sigh. "What are you doing?" Carly asked, looking confused. "We're not making any progress driving these streets," Kenny said. "You're right," Carly agreed. "But what other choice do we have?" Kenny was silent for a moment before speaking. "I think we're good. We can head back and search for Clem." "What?" Carly asked, looking worried. "Did you see how many of those things there were?" "Of course I did," Kenny said. "But they probably cleared out by now." They had sat in the car, driving up and down roads that Clementine could have possibly taken for nearly 50 minutes. "We should be fine to go back," Kenny stated. Carly gave a nod. Maybe he was right. "All right," she agreed. Kenny nodded back before starting the truck again. Clementine was startled awake by a rustling noise. She looked around, panic choking her as she froze in fear, only to find a rabbit. With a sigh, she stood, scolding herself for falling asleep. She started walking once more. Occasionally, she would glance up, startled by bird calls or the rustling of trees. There was still no sign of Kenny or Carly. Things hadn't looked too good back there. Clementine could only hope they were okay. After an extensive search of the area, Clementine was nowhere to be found. "She's not here," Carly mumbled. "Damn it," Kenny snapped. "Where the fuck could she be?" "Quiet, Kenny," Carly said. "We don't need to bring any more of those things to us." "Shit," Kenny sighed. "Where do you think she is?" "I don't know, but we've been out here all day. We need to go back and let the group know what happened. Then we can figure out a plan from there," Carly replied. "What do you mean?" "We have to find her," Kenny said. "We can't do it on our own. We've tried. Besides, it will be dark soon," Carly told him. "We can't just leave," Kenny protested. "She's probably terrified." "She can take care of herself," Carly said. "We have to let the others know. They can probably help us." "All right. Fine," Kenny said. "This is so fucked." Carly couldn't agree more. "I know." Clementine walked for what felt like hours. In reality, she didn't know how long it had been. She wasn't keeping track of time. All she knew was that she needed to find a way out of those woods. Realization dawned on her that the sun would be setting soon. She didn't have the supplies necessary to be in the woods. The bag she carried was full of foods, but that was for the group. She knew if need be, she'd have to use some of the supplies they had gathered, but she wouldn't unless she absolutely had to. She didn't plan on staying out there for too long. Clementine's mood sobered even further at the thought of camping out there in those creepy woods for the night, all alone. She picked up her pace, determined to at least get out of the woods. Several miles later, she made it to a clearing. She walked a bit further and came face to face with a small house. The building seemed sketchy and looked to be abandoned. Windows were broken, and the word "help" had been carved into one of the doors. Everything about the place screamed no good. There was no way she wanted to find out if it was safe. She made her way past the building and walked down the abandoned road, turning the corner only to freeze in horror. Her face went pale as her feet skid to a stop. Only yards ahead of her was a huge herd of walkers. Clementine slowly began to back away, knowing she wouldn't be able to push through that, when some of the walkers noticed her. Terrified, Clementine's knees weakened. So much for being careful. Despite her fear, she turned to run. The minute they arrived back at the inn, they were immediately met with a panicking group. "What's going on?" Carly asked. "Clementine's missing," Sean replied. "We know." Kenny grumbled. "What?" Lily raised a brow in confusion. "She was with us," Kenny informed. "You took her?" Kajar asked. "Why didn't you say anything?" Lily demanded. "We didn't," Kenny scoffed. "Kid climbed into the back seat of the truck." "Damn, she's smart," Sean commented. Lily sighed. "What did you mean when you said you know she's missing?" "We got separated," Carly explained. Herd of walkers showed up. Someone was shooting, led them right to us. Shit. Lily swore. What do we do? Sean asked. We're going to look for her, Kenny said. All right, Lily agreed. We can't all go, some people have to stay here to defend the inn. I can go. Sean offered. You can't. Lily disagreed. Why not? Sean asked. Your leg, Lily said. Sean shook his head, ready to protest. I'll be fine. I said no. Lily cut him off. I'll go. Lily. Larry called, looking worried. Don't worry about me, Dad, Lily said. Me, Kenny, and Carly can go. It'll be dark soon, so bring a flashlight. Kenny and Carly nodded. Keep an eye on this place, Lily said to Sean. As best you can anyway. Sean let out a sigh, but gave a nod. He had a bad feeling, he just hoped everything was okay. Clementine was panicking. She looked to her father's gun, then back to the approaching walkers. She started pulling the trigger as she ran, not knowing if she was hitting any of the walkers. She had to get away. She ran until her lungs and legs were hurting. Faster and faster until she stumbled, then finally she tripped. She hurled towards the ground, scraping her palms and knees. She forced herself up, cradling her wrist, which ached from the unexpected impact with the hard ground. Clementine forced herself up onto shaky legs, cradling her wrist, which hurt from the unexpected impact with the floor. Without second though, she made a dash toward the sketchy-looking house. The door was open. She ran inside, slamming the door shut and using a chair to block it off. She took a short second to catch her breath before realizing she was trapped. Growls from walkers still drifted through the air. Clementine's mind was racing in circles about every possible scenario that could play out. Her heart was pounding. She ran her fingers over her sore wrist and decided it was nothing more than a simple sprain. Katja would be able to look at it when she got back to the inn. Everything was dark. Pitch black. It was hard not to trip or run into something. She walked further into the house and was worried something might be hiding in the shadows. Her body trembled as she noticed another door. She opened it and saw it was a basement. She noticed a faint light at the bottom of the staircase. The walkers were banging on the door, and she was worried they might break in. Without hesitation she started to descend the staircase. The stairs creaked with each step she took. She tried to be careful, not to slip. Once she reached the bottom, she started to look around when a voice was heard. Don't move. Kenny was pacing nervously back and forth. Kenny, calm down, Lily sighed. How the fuck can I calm down? Kenny demanded, clenching his fist. She's probably fine, Carly said in a gentle voice. Then why haven't we found her yet? Kenny asked. It's a good thing we haven't found her. It means most likely, the walkers haven't either, Lily said. How can you be so calm? Kenny grumbled in almost annoyance. Because panicking is not going to help anything, Lily said. In fact, it'll just make things worse. What should we do now? Carly asked. Lily paused, looking to the sky. It's getting dark, we should head back. Kenny's eyes widened. We're just going to leave her out here? There's no way we'll find her in the dark, Lily said. First thing in the morning we'll come back out. Kenny and Carly had no choice but to agree. They knew Lily was right. Clementine looked to see two people. A young man and a woman. The man was holding her at gunpoint. Please, don't shoot. Clementine pleaded. Drop your weapon. The man ordered, still aiming his gun at the teen. Clementine slowly did as he told. I saw your sign, she mumbled. What sign? The man asked. The help sign. Clementine replied. We don't need any help. The man scoffed. Yeah, especially not from some kid. A woman spoke. Clementine didn't know what to say. How'd you get in here? The woman asked. I got separated from my group. Clementine explained. By who? The man demanded. Those monsters, Clementine said. Monsters? The woman laughed mockingly. Clementine glared at her. That's basically what they are. They destroy everything they see. Fair point. The man agreed. The woman rolled her eyes. Regardless, it'd be smart for you to get out of here. The woman advised. What about you? Clementine asked. We have our plan, the man said. Clementine was confused by that statement. What do you mean? Suddenly they heard a bang from upstairs, followed by snarls. What the fuck was that? The man asked. Clementine's eyes widened with stark fear and realization. The door. They must have broke the door. You stupid bitch. You've led them right to us. The woman angrily snapped. I didn't mean to. Clementine stuttered, face paling. Shut the fuck up, both of you, the man said, cutting Clementine off. They don't know we're down here. We can try to find an exit. What for, Skylar? The woman growled. We can just end this now. We can't, Brooke. Skylar turned to Clementine. Unless you want to be a part of this. Of what? Clementine asked. Suicide pact. Skylar replied simply. Clementine's eyes widened. What? She was sure her had skipped a couple beats. Why you can't do that? She didn't want to see anyone kill themselves again. There's no stopping us, Brooke said, glaring at the teen. Why? Are you bit? Clementine asked. No. Skylar answered. Then why? Clementine questioned. She couldn't understand why they would just give up so soon. Why does it matter? Brooke demanded. You can't just kill yourself, Clementine exclaimed. Says who? Brooke snapped. Oh, the kid? But, Clementine stammered, looking horrified. Look, kid. Our minds are made up. If you were smart you'd do the same, Skylar said. No, Clementine said. Figured you'd say that. Brooke shrugged, taking a seat. There's nothing left for us. Skylar spoke. Everyone is dead. Nothing is left. All we have to look forward to is a slow and painful death. That's not true. Clementine shook her head. It is, Brooke said. If we are not bitten, we'll eventually just starve to death. All it takes is one bullet. One single bullet and it would all be over. No more pain, no more suffering, Skylar said in a calm tone. Clementine shook her head. They were trying to convince her to kill herself. Never. Your choice. Skylar nodded. He took a seat beside Brooke. You might want to reconsider. You hear that upstairs? No way you're getting out of here. Clementine ignored him and started searching for an exit. The windows were a little small, but they could probably fit through. We could go through the window. What? Skylar asked. We can leave through one of those windows, Clementine said. Skylar shrugged. Go on then. Clementine approached the window peering out. Crap. What? Skylar asked. House is surrounded, Clementine sighed. Great. Brooke scoffed. See, what we mean now. I'm not going to kill myself, Clementine said. We'll find a way out. Good luck, kid, Brooke said sarcastically. Clementine looked around for any other exits, finding none. With a heavy sigh, she took a seat. I guess we'll just have to lay low for a bit. There was no response. They sat there for hours. Clementine, having nothing better to do, was counting her bullet over and over again. This is it. This is how we're going to die. Might as well make it quick. Brooke spoke. Clementine sighed, but said nothing. She stood and made her way back over to the window. It was dark. She couldn't see anything close by, but she also couldn't see much of anything. The window still seemed like their best bet. Clementine pulled the window open. She wasn't tall enough to get out without a boost. What are you doing? Brooke asked. This side seems clear. Clementine replied. We can make it through the window. All right, Skylar sighed. Better than dying in a basement. Brooke rolled her eyes. You're serious? Yep. Skylar stood. With a sigh, Brooke followed suit. Let's go, Skylar said. I need a boost. Clementine explained. Sure. He made his way over to the window beside her, boosting her up. Clementine hurled herself out the window, wait for the other two to do the same. Once they were all out, they began to walk as quietly as possible. The front of the house was completely surrounded. Holy shit, Brooke said, eyes wide in horror. What do we do? We're going to have to push through. Clementine replied. Are you crazy? Brooke snapped. Maybe, Clementine said. She took a step forward, making her way towards the crowd of undead. Her gun had a few rounds and she made sure to use them sparingly. She used what simple martial arts skills she knew to keep the zombies at bay. Skylar and Brooke weren't too far, being both shooting at zombies as the three of them tried not to get separated. They managed to duck into the woods before making a dash, hoping to lose the herd of undead. Stopping was not an option. Getting to safety was all they could think about. "All right," Brooke panted, "I think we're okay." "Yeah," Skylar agreed. "Now what?" Clementine asked. Brooke and Skylar both didn't respond. The two took a seat, staying silent. Clementine sighed. She assumed this meant they were stopping for the night. The teen took a seat as well, closing her eyes for a moment, listening to the night sounds. Eventually, she drifted off. Clementine immediately picked up on the sound of hushed talking. She was nervous, wondering what was going on. "Close your eyes." Clementine suddenly heard Skylar speak. She opened her own eyes to look to the two. Brooke and Skylar were both holding their guns and Clementine knew exactly what they were planning. "We'll do it on the count of 3, Skylar said. Brooke gave a nod, closing her eyes tightly. She was trembling in fear. Clementine swallowed, nervously clasping her hands over her ears and squeezing her eyes shut. She didn't want to see this. Not again. Skylar began counting. 1, 2. "I can't do it," Brooke cried shakily. "I thought I could, but I can't." "Damn it. What other choice do we have?" Skylar demanded. "I don't know. We'll figure something out," Brooke said. "I'm doing it, with or without you," Skylar huffed. "Sky." Brooke reached for the gun, trying to tug it from him. Clementine looked petrified as she watched the two struggle for the gun. She wanted to call out to them, but she was too shocked to do so. She was unprepared for the loud sound of gunfire and even more surprised when she felt a sharp pain in her arm. It took her a moment to realize she had been shot. The teenager let out a pained yell, clutching her bleeding arm. Brooke and Skylar looked to the teen with wide eyes, just as young Clementine fell to the ground, completely limp. Brooke and Skylar turned to see Clementine just before the girl fell. Her eyes that gave a startled look as she let out a pained yell before collapsing, hard on the ground. Their jaws dropped, and their eyes widened as the teen fell. "We've killed her," Skylar said. "We've killed the girl." "Shit. What do we do?" Brooke asked. "She's gonna turn." "We can't shoot her unless we know for sure," Skylar said. "Know what?" Brooke asked. "If she's dead," Skylar replied. "You're kidding?" Brooke shook her head. "Just shoot her." "No. I'm not a murderer," Skylar said. "We've already murdered her," Brooke snapped. "What do we do now? If she's not dead, she's going to cause problems." "Problems? What are you saying, Brooke? We can't just leave her." "Why not? We might as well," Brooke retorted. Suddenly the teen let out a groan, forcing her heavy eyes open. Her head hurt and her arm was throbbing. She could see blood slowly oozing from her wounded body. She thought spraining her wrist was painful, but this was pure agony. It was much worse than any sprain she had even gotten or any bone she had ever broke. The girl tried to sit up only to have a bullet whiz past her. Startled, she forced her pained body up. More gunshots were fired at her. Panicking, the girl took cover behind a tree. "Stop shooting, you assholes," she spoke. Skylar raised a brow, grabbing Brooke's gun. "Don't." "Skylar, what the hell are you doing?" Brooke demanded. "She just spoke," Skylar said. "Don't shoot." Brooke lowered her gun. Clementine stayed behind the tree, waiting for the two to stop shooting. "It's okay," Skylar called. "You can come out now." The teen hesitated for a moment before slowly coming out of her hiding spot. "Why the fuck were you shooting at me?" "We thought you turned," Brooke said. "All those gunshots are probably going to draw those things," Skylar sighed. "And whose fault is that?" Clementine grumbled. "Calm down," Skylar said. "Forget it. We need to get out of here," Clementine said. "You're bleeding," Brooke mumbled. "Oh wow, genius. I didn't know that," Clementine said. "No need to be rude, kid," Skylar said. Clementine rolled her eyes. "Oh, sorry. I should be nicer to the people who just shot me." At least let me stop the bleeding, Skylar said. Fine, Clementine sighed. Skylar motioned for the girl to take a seat. She did. Look. We understand that you're pissed. You have the right to be, Skylar said. Clementine rolled her eyes. We seriously didn't mean for this to happen. We're sorry. Clementine scoffed. Thanks so much for the apology. I'm all healed now. Skylar let out a sigh, gently pushing the girl's sleeve up to look at the still bleeding wound on her arm. Just leave it, Sky, Brooke said. Let her be a bitch. The only bitch here is you, Clementine said. Stop it both of you, Skylar said. This might hurt. He warned, pressing down on her arm. Ow! Clementine yelped in pain. Sorry, Skylar said. Clementine was silent for a little while before sighing. I'm sorry too. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. Skylar nodded. I feel like shit for shooting you. It's all right. I'll manage, Clementine said. Skylar moved his hand from her arm before speaking. Bleeding stopped for now. Thanks, Clementine said. No problem, Skylar replied. But what? Clementine asked. I need to get the bullet out, Skylar told her. How? Brooke questioned. I can probably use a knife, Skylar said, digging into his pocket. He pulled out a pocket knife. Clementine swallowed nervously. Okay. Clementine gritted her teeth, gulping air into her lungs as she felt the knife digging into her arm. She felt like she would pass out any minute now. The pain was too much. She couldn't take it. Her body jerked involuntarily as she tried to move away from the pain. Got it, Skylar said. He dropped the bullet to the ground. Clementine took a moment to catch her breath before speaking. Is that all? Are you done? She gasped. I think so, Skylar said. Good, Clementine said. Let's get out of here. He offered the tea in his hand to help her up. Clementine accepted the help. Let's go. The three of them walked for a while. Clementine clenched her teeth as her shoulder throbbed. How you holding up, kid? Skylar asked. I'm okay, Clementine shrugged. Skylar scratched his head. You wanna take a break? Clementine shook her head. No. Let's keep going. Where exactly are we going? Brooke asked. I don't know. Anywhere safe, Skylar said. Like someplace safe exist, Brooke said sarcastically. Skylar didn't respond. He just continued to walk forward, leading the way. The group did their best to dodge zombies, not wanting to draw more to them, they avoiding shooting their guns. Eventually they made it out of the woods and onto a darkened road. I can't see shit, Brooke complained. Me either, Clementine said. Shush. Just stay close and we'll be fine, Skylar said. The girls agreed. With the exception of the moon, there was no light. They could only hope they wouldn't walk into one of the walkers. They started down the street and got about half a block or so. It was quiet. Eerily quiet. It's too quiet, Skylar mentioned. Yeah, Brooke agreed, looking around. In the view there were about a dozen zombies. They could barely make them out through the darkness and hoped that it would be the same for the zombies. Let's conserve ammo unless they notice us, Skylar said. Clementine nodded, but held her gun close. The small mob didn't seem to notice them. They kept walking, hoping to stay undetected. The group had been anxious, everyone hoping Clementine would be all right. Kenny found himself unable to sleep. He decided to sit on watch, just in case the girl showed up in the middle of the night. You all right? Carly asked. Kenny jumped at the sudden voice. I'm fine. You don't seem fine, Carly said. I'm just thinking about Clem. Poor kid is probably terrified. Kenny replied. We'll find her, Carly said. I sure as hell hope so, Kenny said. I can't imagine a kid being alone during this shit. She has that gun. I gave her some extra ammo. Hopefully she uses it wisely, Carly said. I'm sure she will. Girl is smart, Kenny said. Yeah. Carly nodded. I'm sure she'll be fine. Kenny sure as hell hoped so. They had managed to make it a few blocks before walkers finally started to notice them. Clementine tried to remain calm, but she noticed Brooke was starting to panic. Skylar tried to reassure the two that things were okay. We can still make it, just Before he could finish that sentence, a walker lunged at them. Brooke aimed her gun and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Clementine's eyes widened as the noise drew the attention of more undead. The creatures started to stumble towards them. "Shit! Run!" Skylar yelled. "Where?" Clementine called. They were completely surrounded. Clementine looked desperately for an opening. Once she found one, the trio ran as fast as they could, trying to lose the walkers. Brooke kept firing her gun, until it finally ran out of bullets. Clementine ran forward, using all her strength to try and keep up with Brooke and Skylar. She had used up a larger amount of energy than she had anticipated. She was starting to feel lightheaded and woozy. It didn't help that her bullet wound was throbbing painfully. Her speed became slower as her vision blurred slightly. "Watch out!" Skylar screamed, noticing a walker quickly approaching the teen. Clementine tried to turn, only to be pushed to the ground, falling face first onto the concrete. Skylar and Brooke looked on in horror as more zombies started to close in on her. There were so many, too many to focus on. Skylar raised his gun, wanting to help the teen, but Brooke grabbed hold of his arm, tugging him. "Skylar, let's go," Brooke said. But Brooke stopped him. "We can't help her. Come on." Skylar nodded. The two of them made a break for it, leaving Clementine behind. They heard a shrill scream as they ran and thought surely the girl was being brutally killed by those creatures. There was no turning back now. Clementine let out a frightened shriek. She shoved the walker, fighting through the pain in her arm. She managed to get the walker off her. She quickly rolled to the side and made her way back to her feet, gun at ready. Clementine looked around, trying to spot Skylar or Brooke, but the two were nowhere to be found. Regardless, she couldn't stay there. There were too many walkers. She placed a hand over her wound, which had started bleeding again. Maybe she was better on her own. Those two seemed like nothing but trouble. Brooke and Skylar had headed back towards the woods, figuring it would be safer than the streets. Skylar couldn't stop thinking about Clementine. They had just left that kid to die. "You think she made it?" Skylar asked. "Who?" Brooke asked. Skylar shot her a look. "The kid." "Who knows?" Brooke shrugged. "Shit. I can't believe we just ditched her like that. What the fuck is wrong with us?" "Anyone would do the same," Brooke replied. "I don't know," Skylar sighed. The two fell silent, both thinking their own thought. Skylar eventually decided to go relieve himself. He walked off to go to the bathroom. Brooke sat down, waiting for him to return when she heard footsteps approaching behind her. "So now what?" she asked. Getting no response, she sighed. "Skylar, what are you doing?" She walked up to the figure, only to realize it wasn't Skylar. However, it was too late, as the monster grabbed her by the arm, pulling her towards its hungry mouth. She let out a scream before it chomped down on her throat. Skylar tensed as he heard a yell, a scream full of agony. Skylar quickly zipped his pants and ran back towards when he had left Brooke. "Brooke!" he screamed as he made it back. The smell of blood was heavy in the air as it dripped to the ground. Blinded by rage, he shot the creature attacking Brooke before watching in horror as she fell to the ground. He dropped to his knees beside her. "You're okay, you're going to be okay." She weakly shook her head, tears falling from her eyes. Skylar felt tears of his own fill his eyes as he held Brooke. "Don't leave me." It was clear that Brooke was in a lot of pain. Skylar couldn't stand to see her like that. The only humanitarian thing to do was to stop her pain. To kill her. He held her closer as her wept. He held her until her last breath, feeling her become motionless in his arms. With tears still running down his face, he stood. Grabbing his gun, he aimed it at Brooke's unmoving form and he pulled the trigger. It was so dark, Clementine had no idea how she was going to make it back to her camp. Clementine stayed on her guard, when she suddenly heard noise from behind her. "Who's there?" Clementine asked. She pointed her gun to the figure only to hear a familiar voice. "It's me." It was Skylar. "Skylar?" she called. "Yeah," Skylar confirmed. She lowered her gun waiting for him to come closer. "Where's Brooke?" She knew she should be mad that they had left her, but she couldn't force herself to be upset. "She's dead," the man said. "What?" Clementine was surprised by the news. "One of those things got her," Skylar said. Damn. What are you going to do? Clementine asked. I'll figure something out, Skylar said. You should go find your group. I wish I could. I have no idea how to get back, Clementine sighed. Skylar nodded in understanding. How's your arm? Clementine shrugged. I can't feel it anymore. Sorry again. Don't worry about it, Clementine said. Are you going to be okay? I guess you don't want to come with me? Clementine asked him. I'd rather not. I'm not group material, Skylar said. You know what's crazy? What? Clementine asked. Brooke didn't want to die. She got bit and I had to shoot her. Pretty ironic that when she decided she wanted to keep living that happened. I'm so sorry, Clementine said. After a moment of silence Skylar spoke. I'm not going to kill myself. You're not? No. Brooke would have wanted me to live. So I'll do that. As long as I can anyway, Skylar said. Clementine nodded. That's good. Yeah, Skylar said. You go on. Take care of yourself. You too. Clementine replied, turning to walk away. She felt bad about leaving him, but she knew this is what he wanted and she couldn't force him to join her. It was nice to meet you, Clementine. Skylar called as the teen walked away. Clementine continued to walk, exhausted. The sun was just starting to rise. She had been out there for so long. Nonetheless, Clementine was determined to make it back to her group. She felt ready to collapse. She barely had the energy to move. She was dragging her feet like dumbbells. Still she didn't slow down. She nearly stumbled over her own feet and was about to just give up, when she noticed a familiar sight ahead. Her eyes widened. She had made it back. She only had to walk a little further. The next step she took was as far as she went. She collapsed to the ground. The girl laid there for countless minutes before slowly everything went dark.